Hi everyone. In this video I'm going to talk to you a little bit about presentations, in particular your assignment for the last unit, which is about a week and a half long. So we're almost at the end and we have a presentation to complete. There are going to be other videos this week that are going to go into more detail about parts of the assignment, but this video is going to be sort of the overview of the assignment and give you a sense of what we're going to be doing. So presentations are very, very common in the workplace. Sometimes you're only giving a 2 or 3 minute presentation. Sometimes it's a 20-minute presentation. Sometimes it's very formal. Sometimes it's very informal. But you are going to be asked in a professional workplace to get up and talk in front of other people. For example, maybe inside your company, your team is working on something and you've been asked to explain what your team is working on to another team. And then your boss tags you to do it, right? Or maybe you have an idea and you present it to your boss and your boss says, sound great, let's present it to our team. And so you have to present this idea to them. Maybe you're going to work with another company and the other company has invited you to come present the idea to see if you guys can work together. And so you're going to go to their office and explain this idea to try to work with them. Maybe you're going to go to a conference and explain a new technology that your company has discovered with other like-minded companies, to share ideas. There are lots of scenarios in which you would give a presentation. Presentations are kind of like emails in the sense that they're not rocket science, and yet a lot of people are really bad at them. It's not that hard to write an email, and yet we've all read really bad emails. It's not that hard to give a presentation, yet we've all sat through really awful presentations. So it's a really good skill to focus on for the last unit, just to give you some pointers on what to do, what not to do, and so on and so forth, okay? So for this assignment, you are going to imagine a very common scenario, which is that another meeting is going to allow you to be a guest speaker. So imagine that you work for a department on campus at FIU that's created these instructional videos for professors because FIU wants professors to use more technology in the classroom. So they told you to come up with some videos, your team came up with some videos, and now we want to get professors to actually use these videos and actually incorporate more technology into the classroom. So there's going to be a meeting and the president of the university is going to be there and a huge chunk of professors are going to be at this meeting. This meeting has nothing to do with you except that they said, hey, why don't you come by and give a 5 to 10 minute presentation at the beginning of the meeting before we get started, and you can present what your team has done. Okay, and that's where your presentation comes in. And so your job is to prepare a presentation where you're going to try to get professors to use your video to learn the program that you have explained in that video, and then to look out for more videos from your team. So for example, you want to convince them that this technology is such a good technology to use in the classroom that they definitely should want to watch the video, because once they start using this technology in their classroom, their lives are going to be easier or better in some way, okay? Then you want to convince them that now that they want to use this technology that you're going to teach them how to use, the best way to get information about that technology is through the video you created. No need to come to our office and ask us how to explain it to you. No need to Google tutorials. Just use the video we created, and here's why our video is a good explanation. And then lastly, you're going to want to convince them to stay invested in looking out for more videos from your department. So there's a multi-step presentation that you're going to do that's going to be at least 4 minutes. If this was a face-to-face class, I would ask you to design a PowerPoint and then present it to the class so that I could see you physically and we could practice physically how to do a good presentation. But because of the nature of an online course, what we're going to settle on is you're going to create a PowerPoint and then you're going to record yourself delivering the PowerPoint, not visually, but record your voice over the PowerPoint. And I've included an instructional video on how to do that. And then that way I can still see your PowerPoint and grade the quality of your PowerPoint, and I can also still hear, how much information are you giving when you see each slide. How is the slide supporting you? How are you supporting the slide? And then also your tone of voice. Do you sound confident? Do you sound personable? So on and so forth. So I'll still get to give you lots of feedback, and it's still really, really good practice. The only thing that's going to be different is I'm not going to see your face. But I think this is still good practice, okay? Now, the best kind of presentation, your book goes over several. The best kind of presentation is called an extemporaneous presentation. If you were presenting at a really big conference and it was a really long presentation, you might have a scripted presentation or a memorized presentation. But in 99% of cases, you do not want to script or memorize your presentation. Number one, scripted presentations are boring, okay? And so that's a fail. And number two, memorized presentations, especially if you have any nervousness at all, can really backfire. Because if you start to say a memorized presentation and you mess up, even though the whole room doesn't know that you messed up, usually you start panicking, oh my God, I messed up, oh my God, I messed up, what do I do, what do I do, what do I do? And you get more and more nervous and it kind of spirals out of control. And there's no reason to do that because a memorized presentation isn't necessarily any better and you're just creating more hurdles for yourself to, cross. So a better presentation is called an extemporaneous presentation, and that's kind of more like you've planned the outline of your presentation and you've kind of thought to yourself, when I get to this slide, I want to tell this story, and when I get to this slide, I want to give this example. And maybe you have like a little note card or an outline to help you remember what order to say things in, but you don't script it. But you practice it a few times to make sure that the outline matches what your brain naturally wants to do. So, maybe you plan an outline of a presentation and then the first time you practice it, you realize your brain keeps skipping 3 slides ahead. Well, you need to rearrange the slides then so that you can give the presentation in an order that makes sense to the way you naturally want to talk about it. So it has to be practiced. But it shouldn't be scripted or memorized. You're still coming up with the exact words you say when you're delivering it, while you're delivering it. You're just planning the organization and practicing so that you have a sort of order down when the story comes in, when the joke comes in, so on and so forth. Now, a thing that's important to remember I have a couple of tips about presenting that I want to go over. Number one, remember that the key to a presentation is not that people say, oh my gosh, that person is such a great presenter. He or she was so confident. I wish I was that confident. That's actually not what you want at all. What you want people to say after watching your presentation, I was like, oh my God, that was a great idea. I really, really want to incorporate that idea. I want to work with you on this thing, or I want to buy this thing you're selling, right? And so the whole point of the presentation is to get people to buy the idea. And so in a lot of ways, it's not about you, right? It's not about like, did you tell a funny example at the right moment? Did you look super cool giving the presentation? It's more like, did you give an example at the right moment, which made people even more interested in your idea, right? So you're selling the idea, not yourself. Another thing that's important to remember is that when you are nervous, all people cannot see most of your nervousness. Like 99% of your nervousness is something only you are feeling. So if you've ever recorded yourself and then heard your voice back to you and you're like, oh my God, I don't sound like that. Do I sound like that? Because the way you sound in your ear is not the way we hear you. And so if you're speaking and you kind of hear your voice trembling, like, oh my gosh, they can tell I'm nervous. We can't actually. We don't hear that. You're the only one who's hearing that, okay? You might be feeling like hot flushes, like I'm sweating, I'm so nervous, my hands are sweating. We don't see that. We're just hearing what you're saying, and we're just trying to focus on the idea that you're explaining, right? So you really need to sort of fake it till you make it. Pretend to be confident for the first couple of minutes of the presentation, and after a couple of minutes of speaking, the nervousness will fade. The worst part of your nervousness is always at the very beginning, and so just keep reminding yourself that we are here to hear your idea, okay? And just keep talking about that idea until you start to relax. If you mess up, it is okay. No one is judging you. No one really cares that much. We're just trying to understand the idea. So let's say you mess up. You can say, hold on just a second. You know what? I'm so sorry. Can we go back one slide? And I forgot to say something that I wanted to go over. And that's totally okay. If you get tongue-tied and you realize like what you're saying out loud is not what your brain is doing at that time, and you're like, your brain is freaking out, you can say, hold on just a second. Give me just a second to collect my thoughts. Okay. All right, as I was saying, right? And you can just pause. do whatever you need to do to manage your stress at the beginning and to make sure that the presentation is clear. But remember that most people are not knowing, they can't feel how nervous you are, even though you feel like it's screaming inside of you, okay? And then related to that, you are not trying to prove you're an expert. That's another way that people kind of fail, is they think, I have to prove I know this really well. And that comes out of a place of insecurity. I have to prove I know this really well, so I need to give like lots of facts and statistics and figures, and I need to like crowd my PowerPoints with all this information because I want everybody to know that I understand this really well. You're focusing too much on yourself. Okay, and we're not here to understand that you're an expert on this. We're just trying to understand the idea you're trying to present us with. And so a much better approach is to think about this as like, imagine that your mom or your friends are in the room and you're trying to explain an idea to them. Now, you don't want to use slang and informal language, but you do want to talk to people the way you would talk to friends about this issue. So you're explaining it not like in a stuffy, like I'm so perfect, I'm so expert sort of way, but just in a like, hey, let me explain this thing to you. I think you're going to like it. And that's the best way to approach a presentation. Now, the only thing that's a little tiny bit of a contradiction to that is, even though your tone should be very personable, whether your boss tells you to or not, you should always dress up for a presentation. If you know you're giving a presentation on that day, get to work with, an ironed shirt, maybe a tie that day, and ladies, the same thing, iron your clothes, maybe wear a nicer dress than you would normally wear, or slacks, but look a little bit more professional that day, unless your boss explicitly tells you not to, like I want you to wear a polo and khakis. But if your boss does not say anything about your attire, you're going to dress up that day, okay? All right, and then the last thing is PowerPoints. People always say, I hate PowerPoints presentations. I hate watching them. They're so boring, blah, blah. Those are bad PowerPoints. You are going to use PowerPoint in the professional world, and the key here is for you to learn how to do it in a good way and in a successful way. So PowerPoints are kind of like your outline. If you don't want to carry like a little note card outline, your PowerPoint itself should function like an outline. When you see that screen, you remember what you're supposed to talk about next, right? But PowerPoints should be kind of like lightning strikes almost of what you're saying. So only the most important things you're saying should be on the screen. So imagine that you talked for 1 or 2 minutes. What were the 3 most important things you said in those 3 minutes? Put those on the screen. The rest should be coming out of your extemporaneous presentation. So one way to think about the PowerPoint is it's just helping me have a visual so I can understand things you're saying. So if you're giving lots of numbers and facts and statistics, and I am hearing so many numbers, they're all jumbled in my head. Now I'm not really paying attention to you because I'm trying to keep track of the numbers you're saying. Those numbers should be on the screen so that I'm still listening to you, but if I got confused about what number you said, did he say 17 million or 17 billion? Oh, he said million, right? It's behind you. So that's why you want to have a PowerPoint. You absolutely should always be saying more than what is on the screen, and everything that's important should be on the screen, okay? So let's say, for example, you're going to go over a budget. A budget is a good thing to put on a screen because I see lots of numbers in an organized table and I can follow along. But then maybe when you get to that screen, you explain how you got those numbers. Like, where did these numbers come from? What's the math behind those numbers? And you're going over the math behind the numbers, and that is not on the screen, but the numbers themselves are on the screen, which help me understand what you're saying. So the PowerPoint is just a support system for you and the audience so that you guys have the things that are the most important things to remember or the most important things to understand on a screen, because a lot of people need to see things written. It also helps you because it functions as kind of like an outline for what you're saying, but you definitely should be saying more than is on the PowerPoint. You should not be reading the PowerPoint word for word and then going to the next screen and reading that screen and then going to the next screen, right? We want to hear examples from you. We want to hear background from you. We want you to explain things. And we are not there to see the PowerPoint. We are there to see you. The PowerPoint's just supporting you. So it's not you walking us through the PowerPoint, it's you walking us through the idea, and the PowerPoint is supporting what you have to say so that we can understand every little detail of what you're saying. So I hope that clarifies how to think about the PowerPoint. As I said, with this unit that's only a week long, I'm going to go in more detail in the next video on what exactly the PowerPoint should look like, what to do and not to do in a PowerPoint. And we're going to have some activities this week that make sure you really understand the do's and don'ts of a PowerPoint presentation and strong presenting skills, and then you're going to make your PowerPoint, record your PowerPoint, and upload your PowerPoint. Then you have one small reflection besides that, and then we're done. So 1.5 weeks left to go. Final push. Let's finish strong. Hopefully anything I say this week should be clear, but if you have any questions at any point, of course, just email me and we can talk on the phone, we can Skype if we need to, or we can just email back and forth to make sure that everything is clear to you. I'm going to stay on top of grades this last week to make sure everybody's up to date on what their grade is in the class. If you need to talk about anything, just reach out to me, okay? All right.